go against this project. I like this project, but at some point I got to draw a line in the sand of how much is being added to Sweeten Creek if the DOT is not going to do anything in the next decade to improve that road. So that's where my concerns lie, and I don't really know how to move forward on that issue since I'm not in the traffic department.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, your comments and certainly Commissioner Dubenik's comments and obviously Mr. Palmquist's response. Yes, we unfortunately do not look at these projects collectively. They are each looked at individually, so you don't take, oh, there's been 3 projects along this corridor. That is an unfortunate part of what is the existing process right now. Hopefully one day that changes.
And kind of my other comment on the bus stop was, you know, if I could see that the bus stop or the bus route is being added to Sweeten Creek to alleviate that problem, I would have more faith in the city transportation department, NCDOT, correcting that as a Band-Aid until it can be widened. So that's why I'm concerned that we're not even putting a Band-Aid on the bleeding Sweeten Creek.
Sure. Well, and I mean, I think if any expansion, and I will say if any expansion were to happen, it would just stop at Mills Gap. It would come up Mills Gap and turn and go back, because it's not going to go further along Sweeten Creek as you start hitting county, if I'm not mistaken, right after this property, or certainly the next one.
Correct. It's like just down the street
Yeah,
from there.
it's not far. So it's not like any bus would go south further on Sweeten Creek, unfortunately. But I mean, even coming to the corner of Mills Gap and Sweeten Creek would certainly help. So
I'm not in love with the retaining wall either, but that's not holding me up necessarily. I mean, I know no one likes the retaining wall. That's just is what it is sometimes.
Thank you. Any?
Yeah, I mean, my issue is like transportation. It comes up every time. You're building 77 units and affordable housing. So it's affordable housing with people who don't have cars, and then there's no sidewalk for them to walk on up to a mile away bus stop, or to even go shopping at the Ingles or the Whole Foods or wherever. So then there's Sweeten Creek Road, which is consistently busy. There is, let's be honest, I bought a house down there 7 years ago. 7 years ago, they told me they were gonna widen Sweeten Creek Road. There's still no plan. So who knows when it's gonna get widened. So it's like 77 units here. The last one was 77 units. It's easy to get away with no transportation study, but there has to be a transportation study done at some point because it's getting tripped every single time. Like my fellow commissioner said, you know, we don't want to be the one that's like, this is the one that the transportation has to be done. But at some point, somebody has to work with somebody to get it done so that we can push these projects through, because we are supporters of affordable housing, but you get another 77, whoever, and in the end, you've got 250 people. And we want them to be able to like pull out of their driveway and not have to wait for 50 other cars to come through. Or we want them to be able to walk down to the gas station or walk down to Blackberry Pizza and to be able to get to grab pizza without being afraid to get hit by a car. So those are my holdups.
Thank you. Commissioner Varden, do you want to wade in, or?
I think a lot's been said. I don't have a whole lot to add. This is a bad design, frankly. It's an unfortunate design, and I think it's a product of a flawed process. Typically, tax credit projects are required to have their zoning approval before they apply for tax credits, and in this case, we're being asked to approve zoning of an awarded tax credit project that has now discovered some site constraints. The NCHFA expects a certain number of units, expects a certain number of parking spaces at this point. The project would be a whole lot better if those base assumptions could be revisited. And we're being asked to bend, not the state. It's a tough one. I'm going to support this project as presented. I'm not going to beg my fellow commissioners to come with me on that support because I certainly agree with all the hesitations that have been expressed.
I think you put it very well, Commissioner Barton. It is, like I said, I know I had some big reservations before because this, you know, as Mr. Palmquist mentioned, you know, we've got some steep slope issues here. There is a large portion of this property that has been left alone for development because of that, and yet we still needed to bend on those steep slope regulations even to get this. And again, this is one of those that definitely, I think there's a few tipping points here that just start to swing me away from the affordable housing thing, which this may go down in history as the first affordable housing project that I might be voting against. And I hate to say that. Yes, please.
I don't know if I could.
Certainly,
Sorry,
please.
I wanted to respond because I certainly understand
Yes.
the comments about the traffic on Sweet. It's pretty bad. Yeah, I mean, is it, even though if it's not required, is it possible to add that as a condition for us to do the traffic study? I mean, it would recommend mitigation. I mean, that's typically what the traffic studies will do.
Sure.
If it finds, and sometimes it finds no impact, sometimes it does. But to me, that seems like a reasonable request that we could do. I understand the concerns. I mean, I like the other gentleman's suggestion of something, I don't know if we can do a mural or something on the retaining wall. I mean, unfortunately, our design options are really limited on the site. There's a lot of competing factors, and just the way, to your point about how the state drives you to certain spots over other spots, you end up in a lot of less than ideal development spots in order to be competitive to secure the tax credit award, which we discussed last time. But I think we'd be open to that. I mean, I think that makes sense, even though we're not required to do that. But that would be the outcome, I think, of the traffic study. Just based on the traffic studies I've done before, they'll analyze traffic counts and make the estimations, and then they'll see if it would have any significant impact on the road, then it would recommend mitigation for, you know, what we could do. But, you know, of course, what we could do, we can't obviously rebuild all of Sweeten Creek Road, but there could be, you know, things other than the signalized flasher. I'm not really sure what they would come up with, but that's another possibility. Just listening to everybody's discussion, that would seem reasonable.
And that certainly is. I mean, if one of my fellow commissioners that made the comment about the traffic study wanted to say, I would like to see that as a condition, and you agreed, we can certainly add that as a condition, that, you know, you do a traffic study and whatever mitigation is recommended from that would be implemented. You're right, though, I'm not exactly sure, they may require some adjustment to the signalization at Mills Gap, other than what you've already mentioned with the flashing signal. I'm not a traffic engineer, I don't know what other things they might recommend, but there could be a few other things.
Yeah, I've seen acceleration, deceleration lanes.
And that's possible, yes.
You know, I mean, it does get, yeah, I mean, those are kind of the most normal things that I've seen. You don't want to do anything to impede the traffic flow, obviously, on Sweeten Creek, but I mean, that's up to the traffic analysts, but they have a variety of different things that they can propose.
Isn't the cost of one of those like 150 grand?
No, it's not that
No.
much.
Isn't that what the traffic engineer said?
He said like 15 to 20.
Yeah, it's
15 to
around
20,
$20,000.
okay.
It's around $20,000. Yeah,
Okay.
just based on previous ones. I have had to do them for larger projects, and it's just, you know, the condition is we do whatever the traffic analyst recommends, and that's part of what we have to add in. But I mean, going back to an additional $1.5 million on construction cost, you know, I think the cost of mitigation on Sweeten Creek would be a lot less than having to go back to our older site plan, which we can't afford.
Sure.
But that would be at least, you know, us being responsive to the community's concerns on traffic, which having walked across that road several times to get to the site, and almost gotten hit, I understand the
I
concerns
was
of
going to
traffic.
say, and to add in the crosswalk. I don't know how they would.
Crosswalk
Like,
where?
What would you say? By that Black Bear Pizza.
We can't condition anything that's not on their property or directly adjacent, I mean, that's.
That'd be a pretty long run sidewalk. There's no sidewalk there right now, but.
Well, there's
would be
also
a-
no sidewalk, but
There's no sidewalk to it. I mean,
There's no
I just
sidewalk
don't
along
know if
Sweeten
it's
Creek.
anything- And this is a DOT road too,
Right.
so
Bill,
I don't know if the
Sweeten Creek
traffic
is, but-
study
Would warrant.
would warrant that, but I suppose you could look at that and if DOT would allow it, but I have no idea the cost of that.
But-
You're kind of opening yourself up to.
yeah. Well, but I
some
thought,
cost that might be.
I thought
Yeah,
the
that would be a little
general
farther
rule
away
was
from
we
our
couldn't
site.
really condition anything that was doing something.
Well, yeah.
Not on there.
Well, if it
Yeah.
helps their development
Sure.
with connectivity or their residents connecting, I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, because there is that issue of.
We would have to look at
There's
that.
no sidewalk to nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, without the sidewalk to connect to that crosswalk, I don't know what benefit that would be. The cost of the sidewalk running from our site down to where we would really have to look at that. I think,
Yeah. Well,
I think
you
we might be a
probably
little more hesitant on that, but I think,
You probably have to get some encroachment agreements on the other
and that's the other
property
thing
as
too,
well.
we'd have to go through DOT, who may or may not agree to that, but, I I mean, we
Sounds
can
like-
Want them to
we can
even
look at
look
that,
at
but,
it, I guess.
we can look at it, I think that one might be a
That
little,
was more like.
little harder and
where I
more
was going,
costly.
Like to look at it.
Sure. Just to start writing things down and clarify, so it sounds like that the developer is in agreement to a condition to do a traffic study.
yes.
Okay, so that is, I don't have that list of conditions up. What condition would that be? Mr.
Number
Marcus, do you have those up, or does somebody
4?
else?
No, sorry.
That makes sense. Do we just add it to the, I'm trying to see if there's anything else that's related to any traffic that would make sense of where to put it anywhere else, but it probably just needs to go to the end.
Could be number 8, but that's just about the
Right,
driveway.
vehicular access will be
You
provided.
could make it
Yeah.
to new 9 and then move something else around.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe just for right now, we'll just say it's an added condition for a traffic study, and we'll figure out if it makes sense to put it anywhere.
And it's not just a traffic study, because I think that.
It's the traffic study.
And to implement whatever.
The recommendations
Yeah,
of the traffic
implement the
study.
recommendations, yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it will come with either recommendations of nothing needed or some
Yep.
specific improvements we need to make.
Sure. Okay. And then Commissioner Bubenik, you would like to, let's see, if
And
it's,
as part
if
of
it's
that
study.
to just, review the possibility of any kind of crosswalk or connectivity.
Could you do, depending on the traffic study, you could see how many pedestrians walk in that area? Is it
I'm
gonna
just
be?
wondering how we write this as a condition, or if it's more of a verbal agreement.
Could we work with city
Study.
staff to
Th-
explore
that's-
that?
This is kind of what I'm thinking. I'm trying to think of how we've done this in the past. Usually we don't do this as a condition of looking at things that are off property. Is it more depending upon, and again, this is more of kind of like you're agreeing what we're saying, we're not hard writing it down, but
To work with city
to agree to
transportation
work
staff
with
to see if
this,
there's-
with
to
city
look at it.
transportation staff and DOT on potential for a crosswalk at Sweeten Creek and Mills Gap? Is that getting to your concerns?
Yeah,
Okay,
I just
but it's
want
not
to-
necessarily a condition.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's also
okay.
not going the extra step, but if they say, yeah, it can be done, that they have to do it, they don't have to do it.
Correct.
It's just, it
That's a
helps
good
that
faith,
somebody's
these are like, that's
analyzed
a
it.
good faith effort.
Exactly, yes. Yes.
We can have all those
Okay.
discussions and figure out the feasibility of it.
Okay,
We will
yeah.
have to look at our overall project budget on that part.
Sure.
Because I do have to be careful of
Sure,
being able to close it and
okay,
build it, but yeah, I think we can definitely work with city staff and
Okay.
DOT and see what the possibility would be of that.
okay. Commissioner Fairclough, Bubenik, you're good with that added condition and those kind of good faith agreements? Okay,
Okay, was there anything else? I just wanted to address that, because that
Thank
made
you
sense
for
to me.
addressing
thank you very
Okay.
much. Okay,
Would you like me to attempt, or is there more discussion?
I think that's all the discussion, so.
Was there anything else about, he said, what about a mural, what would help with the retaining wall? And I didn't hear if there were additional.
Two 18-foot retaining walls maybe, but that starts to impact the property. I mean, again, to me, this is one where the mitigation in my mind for a 38-foot retaining wall is to redesign the site. Like each retaining wall being 20 or 25 feet. Like, I mean, that, if it was further away, like, that kind of went off. But the part that's closer to the entrance, that's far enough back. Like, I'm okay with how tall is that gonna be? Maybe if that was in the 32-foot range. It really is that one part in the northwest corner. That is the one that really gets me. I mean, that thing is, I mean, not to say that the one that's on the 15-foot setback doesn't. I mean, that's also going from 9 to 38 feet, so that's a monster as well. So, anyway,
You just put kudzu at the top of it.
there'll be kudzu on it anyway. So yeah, thank you, Miss Ashley, but I think we're good on retaining wall for now.
Okay, I'm gonna try this. I motion to approve the conditional zoning amendment request for the property located at 3124/3130 Sweeten Creek Road Zone Residential Expansion Conditional Zone RES EXP-CZ for the modification of the site plan and find that the request is reasonable in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets development needs of the community in that request. 1, prioritizes greater densities of development overall. 2, increases the supply of affordable housing in proximity to transit, schools, and parks. 3, utilizes creative design solutions which minimize impacts to the natural environment, such as natural open space and steep topography, with the added condition that the applicant will
Perform
a transit traffic analysis study and implement whatever mitigations are or are not are required, as well as the condition that
We'll work with staff and DOT.
They will work
to see what,
city transportation staff.
city transportation staff, to see what can be done for a crosswalk.
and the applicant will work with city transit staff to see what can be done about implementing a crosswalk.
A crosswalk at Sweeten Creek and Mills Gap Road intersection. Yep,
I got close.
you did good.
Does that sound good to the applicant, those conditions?
That's what I understood.
Okay.
That's reasonable.
Great.
Oh, I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed, aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2, and that is definitely history. That hurts. Thank you very much. I do very much appreciate your willingness to do the conditions on the traffic study. I just, I'm sorry.
No, I understand it's, it is a very challenging site and we do not have a lot of different options. And
Yeah,
I understand your concerns, that's an extremely volatile.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But thank you, I appreciate it.
All right. Are we good? Does anybody?
But I
Okay.
can just do-
No, what, we got 3. We're going to take a 5-minute break at 6:21 PM.
Okay, how's it going?
I just read the Savannah race.
Oh, yeah, how's that?
I am so slow.
Just keeping you waiting, Clay. Yeah, well, you know, death by a thousand paper cuts. Virtual paper cuts, but, you know, still.
Well, it's only because there's so many interesting things to look at
Yeah.
in Savannah that I got through. I got through running Savannah Banana Stadium, it's fun.
Yeah.
No, no,
How's it going? How's it going? I'm gonna ask everything.
Yeah, so. This is where the idea is to change. You guys have to keep pushing for this for the next 4.5 years when I'm gone. Yeah, oh yeah, anytime you want to, as long as.
Say, I'm gonna have some Under Armour coupons in like 2 weeks. I'm gonna have some Under Armour coupons in like 2 weeks.
That's what I'm saying, so if there's something you want to see, we could bring it up, they could say no, I mean, if I have a problem, things before they say no.
Yeah, it's in a separate section of the zoning code. We're actually working on it.
That's even better.
Land use tables, and looking at that one table. Because it is confusing.
Typically, that doesn't happen. So I've heard it the first time, this is the second time around, right? Usually they're only coming to one time.
Yes, if you go to,
Clued in, I think he was getting that, oh, maybe I should bring this forward instead of that off.
South Asheville people are gonna start.
Oh, yeah, I'm like, every time.
Oh, yeah, no, please, go ahead, yeah. Okay, so.
The other thing you guys need to do is,
It's probably less. Traffic studies, I don't
Where it falls, but it's somewhere, it's like it says, these, parcel by parcel.
All the apartments are right there in the corner. What's it for? It's right there, and all four and one behind it.
Nah, it's not great on a phone. I've never tried it on a phone.
Well, let's just take.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you scroll basically through the entire section, which is pretty voluminous,
We know we've
end
already
up at
too long, right? But they haven't been built yet, so they aren't impacting
table
traffic.
eventually.
But they will by the time this other one is done, right? So it's that, yeah. Some of these traffic studies need to look, once things are
A lot of graphics. Here we go.
built.
Yeah. So seven, the very, one of the last sections, 728, subsection 3.2, has the land use table from 1 through 6.
Well, I mean, they may recommend that acceleration.
Yeah, and all the
They've
uses
got a
there.
little bit of room.
We're working on maybe next plan zoning commission.
There is a place
consolidating all of it.
Shoe up and be a little closer instead of making a dead right-hand turn. Maybe that's what I'm saying, it'll be the acceleration lane.
This guy said it wasn't working, it was the other roads.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's the same thing as last time, it was being reviewed at that.
There you go.
This
This is why. I mean, Long Beach used to be a two.
It's really are just like makeshift hybrid style.
I don't know that's gonna be much, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, I mean, why not? Might as well, if you can.
I was like, we're in a tiny. Yeah. What?
I'm gonna go sit in the audience.
On the last one?
No, this is fine, yeah. This thing is just like right for my legs. Wow. Like, no, thank you.
Looking at that and going, I would rather give up another little chunk of the steep slope that's coming out the wall. I mean, we already gave up some of it, like, I'll just give up more. All right, let it be known that on April 5th, I voted against affordable housing. Somebody's gonna come after me for that one.
Why is it true like that? What makes it?
You can't put that in the paper.
On recess, Chair Archibald.
There's only that term. All right. Sorry, didn't miss, Commissioner. We will restart the meeting at 6:27 PM. We need to have a recusal for our next item, I believe.
That's right, Chair Archibald. This next project is a Mountain Housing Opportunities Project, so presents a clear conflict of interest, and I'll be requesting recusal.
Okay. All those in favor of recusing Commissioner Barton, say aye.
Aye.
You are recused. Thank you. All right, so we have a request to conditionally rezone the property located at 16 Restaurant Court from Office Business OB to Residential Expansion Conditional Zone, RES EXPCZ. Property is identified as PIN 9658082350 in the Buncombe County Tax Record. Property owner is Mountain Housing Opportunities Incorporated, and the contact is Shane Sains. Planner coordinating review is Clay Mitchell. Welcome, Mr. Mitchell. This is your first time, isn't it?
It is, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Too bad I don't have a water pistol.
I expected no less. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Clay Mitchell. I'm the new planner with the City of Asheville. This is my first presentation. This is a conditional zoning petition This is property, it's a 1.31 acre parcel fronting on what is known as Restaurant Court, which is a privately maintained but public accessible street that comes off of Tunnel Road. There's an ABC store right at that intersection, and then it's immediately adjacent to what I presume is the world-famous Mountaineer Inn. The current zoning is office business. The proposal is residential expansion. You see the property here. Above the site to the north is what I learned today was the Cheeseburger in Paradise or something, which is now the Big Sky Real Estate Association, I believe. And then just off the map to the top is Longhorn Steakhouse and significant amount of parking. The subject parcel is the red parcel. It is very flat. It's been graded. It has smaller existing retaining walls, I'll show you in the site plan, and a significant amount of growth within the buffer area existing along the borders of the property. To the south is, I believe, as far as I can tell, is Bowcatcher Common. I don't know if that's the name. It's a condo development with several two-story dense developments, single-family housing, and some other neighborhoods to the west. And then to the east is obviously the kind of urban corridor development that you see along Tunnel Road. Future land use designates this area as urban corridor, but I would point out to the west and the south of the site, it is also off property designated as traditional neighborhood. I believe that is important because this proposed development kind of represents that transition from urban corridor over to traditional neighborhood, and I'll go into that. No designation or change in the designation is required in our opinion for this property. This is the overview site plan. The building in the upper north along Restaurant Court is one building with a single roof. It has two footprint. It's a single building, and that's why 16 and 18 Restaurant Court. 16 will be the primary residential building that you see along the south. 18 will be the common amenities in the leasing office building. This project is 60 residential units, which is why we're here in a conditional zoning. It is a 4-story building for the residential units, single story for the amenities in the common buildings. It's 100% affordable at a variety of levels. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Overall, the site complies with all of our UDO with a few technical modifications, one of those being the reduced parking. There are 20 spaces, standard spaces, 8 accessible spaces delineated on the site plan. There's an existing sidewalk along Restaurant Court that's only 5 feet wide. Residential expansion calls for 10 feet. There is a planting buffer between the sidewalk and Restaurant Court, and the internal sidewalks will be a minimum of 5 feet where residential expansion calls for 10. So that's another technical modification. There's subsurface stormwater. There is one new retaining wall proposed, and that's what you see in the pink. There is a retaining wall in the right-of-way along Restaurant Court, and then if you look on the site, there are retaining walls that they're relatively low that go all the way around that allows that site to be that flat grassed area that you can see in the aerial surface. Those retaining walls will stay, and existing and proposed landscaping will fill in. I'll show you on the next slide here. This is the landscaping plan to give you some indication of what's going on. They comply with all the vehicle use area, building impact, buffers, type A buffer along the west and the south where it abuts the residential zone. To the west, because that's existing office business, it does not require the type A buffer. The open space and tree canopy are supplied with a mixture of plantings as well as preserved existing trees on the site. Like I said, there's an extensive amount of growth along the west and the southern and even on the eastern side. So beyond the common amenity building, there's plans for covered outdoor picnic areas. There's a playground in the north area between the building and the amenity building. One of the issues, another technical modification, is that the residential expansion calls for the building to front on the street and the parking behind, we feel that a modification is reasonable here where the parking would be in the front. The building does L-shape. There is some frontage on Restaurant Court, so that will be another technical modification. These are the elevations. Again, you can see down the lower left the L shape of the building. L. Again, same. And this on the left side of the screen, Technical Review Committee, and I think it's worth mentioning here, one of the components of the affordability, which I thought was worth calling out, is that the applicant is at least going to try and focus on providing housing for people who age out of foster care. And I think that's a really unique approach. I know personally through friends of mine who work in this field that this is a real challenge for affordable housing. It's all of a sudden you are now no longer being cared for, and having that kind of asset in the city, I think is a real progressive approach. And so I felt like I wanted to bring that up as well. It has been approved with conditions by the Technical Review Committee on March 6th. We're here tonight. We're tentatively scheduled, I believe, for April 25th with the City Council. And because of all of that, we are able to make a recommendation that you approve this. These are the technical modifications laid out in a list for you. The sidewalks, the parking, the location of the parking between the building and the road. And then they've also asked for a reduction of the front setback to 5 feet from 15 feet, which we think is reasonable, and there are no bike lanes into the development. There are, and the applicant has increased bike parking because my understanding is that all Asheville buses are equipped with bike racks. So even though there's no biking on Tunnel Road, if residents have bikes, they will be able to put them onto the bus and get to various areas throughout the city. So, sorry, I jumped the gun. So accordingly, staff recommends approval of the proposed amendment subject to the conditions that you have been provided.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell.
You're welcome.
Any comments, questions from the commission right now?
My question is about, I was actually asking about the bikes. Is there like bike storage somewhere, like with the parking? I know this has come up in some past projects. Kind of like lockers?
Yeah, I know that the design team is here and we had that specific conversation. I'll let them answer it. But yes, we talked about that during technical review, being able to bring the bikes inside or having them stored somewhere.
Yeah, like I'm thinking like stored down where like the cars are, if there's like a locker or something like that, so you don't have to take them upstairs. I lived in like a bikeable city in affordable housing, and so I think that would be something good to like put into here, and maybe they can speak to that when they come up here.
I'm clarifying, the 5-foot setback reduction to the front of the street.
It's primarily to accommodate the common building.
Okay, so I see the line on here, just looks like the common building is 15 feet back already doing.
Is it the retaining wall?
Oh.
Retaining wall, and we've got some parking there as well as that first.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Regarding the comment Commissioner Bubenik made about bikes, and I know this comes up and has come up, I feel like all of these developments, and this isn't necessarily a fault. I think it's perhaps somewhere where maybe the UDO needs a little tweak, or we haven't quite caught on to how we should word it with some of these projects. But a lot of them are, because we don't have bike infrastructure, there's always the condition no bike lanes will be provided into the site. I know it has come up before where we have requested at least having the road designated with sharrows. I would at least like to throw that out there as a proposal to the development team that could be that condition. I'm looking at condition number 7, that they wouldn't be provided. It's just that there would be sharrows provided, which again is just painting. I know that's not necessarily an amazing resolution of bike facilities, but it's getting us somewhere. And at some point, I think some of what had come out of the Tunnel Road Corridor Study will change. Hopefully, maybe there will be bike lanes on Tunnel Road and such, at least that visual designation will start to show up more. So anyway, that's more throwing it out there for them before they come up so that we can have a discussion about that. So anyway.
Another question I have, the existing retaining wall, that's on the north side of the property, or is it north side going down the west?
So the existing retaining wall that's just off-site is on the northeast side, for lack of a better.
Okay.
You can see it's kind of, it jogs there. And then they're proposing a second, kind of a step up. I think it's about 5 feet tall, retaining wall right there. And then the landscaping plan shows the existing retaining walls that are in vegetation. They're almost hard to see if you go visit the site. And then at the back of the building, there's an area where there is no retaining wall existing, nor is there one proposed.
So my idiot question is, too, and this is, I guess, more to the applicant again, was the existing retaining wall evaluated that it can hold the weight of another retaining wall in the parking lot on? I mean, has that retaining wall been looked at as it's still stable and safe to use?
Probably a great
Assuming-
time to transition to
Yeah,
the development team.
Yeah, that's definitely a great transition for that.
I have not done that determination.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and have the applicant come up and speak then.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair and Commissioner, for your time this evening. I'm Sean Sains with Civil Design Concepts, subbing in for Warren a little bit.
I was wondering why Mr. Suggs wasn't here.
Yeah, it's my
Let
turn.
the expert talk.
Yeah. Again, thank you for your time and consideration this evening. We've worked with Mountain Housing Opportunities on numerous projects and excited to be part of this project as well. And honestly, as CDC, we've looked at this site numerous times for various developers and happy to see Mountain Housing's project actually come to fruition for this site, as we feel it's a great use and just design. Again, it's 60 affordable units. I don't want to repeat anything Clay said, so I'm just going to kind of jump to your comments before I forget them. To the retaining walls point, we do have a geotech report, and we are aware of its conditions and that it can handle the weight, and that's even the walls on the east and west side. We've even been spaced away from them in accordance with that report as well. So we've kind of designed all around those constraints in that sense. The Sharrow comment, restaurant court is privately maintained and owned. I can't speak for it or commit us to saying we can put Sharrows on restaurant court. If it was City of Asheville Road, I feel like there's a bigger conversation we could have there. But we are definitely committed to, we're more than happy to put them on our property. And yeah, I get where you're coming from. I moved here from Portland, Oregon. I know biking. So yeah, I didn't want to deter from that, but is there any, did I miss any of the comments?
The
Bike parking.
lockers.
Yeah, sorry. As I was asking it, it came to my mind. We are providing, as of right now, our design is showing a minimum of 8 exterior bike parking spaces. There's no central, from my understanding, there's no central locker inside, but each unit does have storage space that could allow for the bike parking for each individual.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think more what I was considering directly as the condition would be the Sharrows on the driveway, and then I guess what I would say is similar to what we had on the last agenda item is, kind of the good faith effort to work with city transportation staff to, and maybe it's not until bike infrastructure is provided on Tunnel Road, but at some point, I think it would be great, given that this is, an affordable apartment complex. We know that I will jump back a little bit and say, I applaud that you have reduced the parking. I am all in favor of this. This does not bother me at all that you're not providing the required parking.
Can't take credit for that. That was
But anyway,
MHO's request.
that's great. I wish more projects would do that. And so thinking about that, I think, at least having the idea that, yes, we know someone's gonna be biking, we know the buses, as Mr. Mitchell mentioned, all have bike racks. I think at least just getting that awareness out to people is gonna be important. So yeah, if you would agree to the condition that the Sharrows be on the driveway, and then again, good faith effort to work with the city transportation staff about actually sharrowing restaurant court during construction, after, I'll just kind of, again, leave that with a good faith effort with Mountain Housing.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm fine with that.
all right, great. Yes?
I got mixed feelings about my next comment. Is there any kind of street lighting required out there? I'm not a big proponent of just throwing light poles up everywhere, but where this is located, and I work in close proximity to this, I mean, this is an area I would want there to be some kind of street light if there was a parking lot. Is that a requirement, or is that, I didn't see it shown on the plans or anything.
Seems like there would at least be a requirement for some parking lot lighting, although that is starting to,
And again, I'm not a huge proponent of that, just given this location, I think that might be something.
certainly, I don't believe there are any street lights anywhere on Restaurant Court. As for lighting in the parking lot, I'm sure you could.
I know there's a standard, like a minimum standard
Yeah.
lighting that we have to meet for safety purposes.
But that's gonna be strictly in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not necessarily along Restaurant Court, but I
Sure,
think
I mean, that's
your
not in their
comment is
purview.
somewhat well taken. Yeah, yeah, typically on roads that small, I wouldn't, you typically would not have any kind of street lighting requirements, at least in the UDO or anything, so. Not to say that, if the applicant was amenable, that there couldn't be something outside excuse me, on Restaurant Court bordering on their property. In other words, in front of their property. You can't really, again, this gets back to, we can't really tell them to put it on the rest of Restaurant Court.
Sure.
So, if you want to consider that. Thank you very much. We will go ahead and open for public comment at 6:48. Yes, please.
Can you do me a favor, and the initial photograph, the aerial, could you put that
Yep.
up? And I'd like to move back to the site plan in a minute. My name is Doug Mendel. I'm a resident on 419 Bowcatcher Road, so I'm 200 feet away from that property. And I want to speak to about the conditions for the rest of the homeowners and even the businesses in the area. Because I do feel, and I forgot the name of the property that's directly south there. You've got the 12 units there.
As far as I can tell, it's something called Bowcatcher Common.
That's a nice name, but it's not exactly the impact.
It's what's on the deed.
Yeah, it's a Section 8 property that they were able to, because they put the back of the houses toward the street, they were able to shoehorn 2 extra units in there. It was originally approved for 10 units. This is coming from the neighbors that I've talked to. I'm a new resident there. I've been there since September. And also, by the way, I have a 10-year history of, as a grant monitor for emergency transitional and supportive housing, and an executive director that put the first Housing First program in Atlanta. But I have to say that I have concerns about this development. Already, that Section 8 facility there is causing the street, where the rest of the traditional neighborhood is, to suffer. And it's not because of the residents. It's because of the management of that particular property. Just about a month and a half ago, you'll see how clear the tree line is between the back of the houses and the street where Bowcatcher is there. That was totally sheared off. Now the residents that are in those properties right there, look at the back of these buildings. That is not code compliant. So we're suffering from that particular issue already. So we're concerned about suffering again because of another program here. Now, I'll walk through my concerns, so I hope they don't seem unreasonable. The other part of it is 500 feet from that property is the October Road treatment facility. No problem there, it's well managed, but it's got an open door policy and it's a methadone clinic, so there's a lot of foot traffic there. And I'm gonna return to this later, but you know for a fact that up and down Tawna Road in that section, it's one of the most intense transient corridors that we've got in the community as well. There's a lot of camping on Bowcatcher Mountain. All the properties there, the business properties suffer from that. If you go behind Innsbruck, well, I don't recommend it, but carry something that will keep you protected, because that's a bathrooming area for lots and lots of people. So I have concerns about that. The other concern is the small amount of green space that's there on that property is kind of insufficient for, if you've got 60 residential units, 2 and 3 bedrooms, some of them, you're gonna have 120 to 150 residents living on 1.6 acres, and with a little sliver for green space, I don't think that dignifies the living of the residents there. And if you have 20% of that population being aged out of foster care, what is that, 18, 20, about that age? You know, not quite 20 years old. There's got to be something for those folks to do as well. So I'm concerned about the dignity of the residents as well. You look at that, and then I'm not a big fan of the variance needed for the parking spaces, and I'll tell you why. Every one of those 120 to 150 residents, you've only got 20 spaces. So that takes out, let's say, 20 residents have cars, 40 residents then get transportation from that. 80 or more people will be walking in and out of that property all day long to get the transportation, to get their job, school, whatever. They have to walk right past the ABC store to get transportation. I don't think that's a good look. Then they have to fight through all the transit traffic that's already there. I just think that there are problems with the intensity that's already placed on a neighborhood that is facing transit problems. The transit problems that are associated with the social services that are already there, and the lack of management with an existing affordable housing project there. That said, I'm a huge fan of affordable housing, no question about it. But I do believe that the management of those type of facilities is critical to their success. And so I operated a facility in Atlanta directly in a major neighborhood. Nobody knew about it because we managed very tightly and with a lot of care and concern for the rest of the neighborhood. What I have not heard in the discussion here is the discussion of how the neighbors are going to be impacted by this. I think it's a great thing. Everybody's happy about the opportunity to build on a flat space without lots of building conditions. But in this case, the neighborhood also needs to be considered. So.
I'm sorry, I think that's time. Were you, yeah.
Yeah.
It's 3 minutes, I'm sorry.
Fine.
Thank you.
But I think you get my point.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, public comments? Seeing none, we will close for public comment at 6:50. I'm sorry, we will not close for public comment. Yes, please, come on up, sorry. I usually wait to see people stand up, I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. Tim Sadler, and I was just wondering if the developer has looked at possibly including bus passes with the project. I don't know if it's been brought up, but you could buy the bus passes in bulk and then offer it as like an amenity. I don't know if it was brought up because it is, you know, if it's affordable housing and it's right there on the bus line, the folks could have an opportunity to get them at a reduced cost if they're part of the project. I just don't know if that has been brought up. I helped a developer with that at one point, and I know it's sometimes mentioned, but I don't know if that's something for P&Z or if that is when they go to get a permit or meet with staff, so.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, we will close for public comment now at 6:54. Thank you for the comment about the bus passes. That's certainly, you know, a question for the developer. I know that that has come up on previous ones. I know we definitely have kind of written that as a condition most typically with commercial and hotel kinds of things. I don't know that we've ever done that with a housing development, but I'll certainly just bring that up with the development team as well. And I appreciate the concerns of the neighborhood. Certainly that is one thing that we all do consider. While it may not be brought up directly in the discussions, it is something that we all do consider. I mean, we're all, you know, either citizens directly of the city of Asheville or, as in the case of the two county commissioners, within, I don't remember, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's within a half mile of the city limits. Anyway, we all live here. And we all, you know, work and live in the city of Asheville and are concerned, obviously, with the residents of the city. That said, I do want to push back a little bit. I mean, I can't say that this is not a good site for housing. I've said this before, I will say it again for the next 5 months I'm here. Every single neighborhood in Asheville needs to have affordable housing, no matter what that looks like. I don't care if it's 60% AMI, if it's 30% AMI, if it's for foster youth, if it's 120% workforce housing. Every single neighborhood needs it, and any neighborhood that comes up and says they don't want it, I will say it right now, I am not gonna listen to that. Every neighborhood needs it and needs to accept that it's gonna happen. And you're correct in saying that, yes, it is about management. And there are, I'm sorry, public comment is closed. It is about management. Yes, that is correct. We cannot enforce management. We, as PZC, cannot enforce trees being removed. Those are things that, if a neighborhood has concerns about those, they need to contact the appropriate city department. Go to 411, I believe it's 411 if I'm not mistaken. You can file complaints there. Every single neighborhood needs affordable housing, and if a neighborhood wants to complain that because there might be a problem with one particular development in their neighborhood, they don't want any more, I'm sorry, I'm gonna draw a line on that. That's not gonna sit well with me at all.
So I have some thoughts. Thank you for the applicant and the public comment, and I certainly want all of that. For the record, the methadone clinic is in the area, but it is further down on Mineral Springs. I think the one right across from it's the Realtors Association or Land of Sky Association of Realtors. Which, you know, some of my concerns for the lighting and the safety there were the proximity to that methadone clinic and the liquor store and the other things there. But, you know, I see what they're doing is trying to improve this area of the community. And I also, since I drive up Bowcatcher Road a lot personally, it is a very narrow road, not a lot of shoulder, it's not a safe place to walk. I would have been very concerned when I first looked at this project if the flow of residents was being directed down Bowcatcher. My understanding is that Restaurant Court is going to be the primary vehicular and pedestrian access point, and I like that because then we're breaking up the flows of those traffic into that. We're spacing out that traffic flow through that neighborhood area, so I'm happy to see that's being spread out more. I still have some concern about adding that on there, but my understanding is that there is not really a cut through or anything from the property to Bowcatcher. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone.
I believe you're correct, Commissioner Fairclough. The
So-
only access is off a Restaurant Court.
So what I'm getting back to is kind of my question earlier is about if it's not this applicant, if we're making this now pedestrian thoroughfare down Restaurant Court, does there need to be additional lighting, sidewalk safety standards and such thrown on there? I think Restaurant Court's more apt to be able to have that kind of improvement, where I think Bowcatcher Road is already way too tight to add anything other than the drainage ditch that's already there. Those are my kind of off-the-cuff comments or thoughts. I don't know if that helps or hurts anybody.
Let me try to put that into a potential condition here, and certainly this will be, obviously, I know Mr. Suggs knows this, this is a conversation. If a condition was placed that requested UDO code compliant lighting on the sidewalk adjacent to the subject property on Restaurant Court, is that?
I don't know if I want to make,
that?
I don't know if I want to make it a condition because I feel like the Realtors Association, the Mountaineer Inn, and the other tenants of that street need to be,
Okay.
if that's a condition, it shouldn't just be put on the one
Noted
developer is
and
my
yeah.
personal thought. So I wasn't gonna
Yeah.
slap a condition at
Noted
that.
and appreciated. Perhaps
I'm
it's
I'm just whining.
well, I mean, maybe it's not necessarily a condition. Maybe, again, this gets back to that good faith effort of the applicant working with the adjacent business owners and the city, given that, again, it's a city street, to collectively
Yeah, it's a private.
fund, oh, yeah, but collectively fund sidewalk lighting? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we can, again, have the discussion with the applicant, but I certainly hear your concerns. I think they're well intended, and I think there could be some benefit here for everybody, so I don't know how we want to try to move that forward.
I wasn't at the point where I felt like a condition had to be made. I
Okay.
just wanted that out there in the ether.
Sure, sure.
Well, I know they have to provide a minimum level of lighting to the sidewalk. Would that help you feel better about it? No? I mean, that's code required, building code.
But that's internal.
Yeah.
We're talking about along.
I don't feel like I need to
Private
make a
road.
petition unless you
Yeah.
feel like you need to.
Yes, Mr. Sugg, sure, certainly.
So I think we have somewhat limited control along our frontage. We still have to talk with other,
Sure.
owners. But after it gets past our frontage, we start to lose some flexibility. What's there's there. We want it to be safe, and that's our passage. But I don't know that we could fully commit to guaranteeing something when there's a lot of parties involved.
Sure.
That's the only part I would add to that.
Thank you, and that's why I was wondering if it's more just a request to have some good faith conversations and make a good faith effort to do something along there. And maybe it is only something, maybe what comes out of it is that you do some lighting right in front of this parcel, and that's, at least as much as could be done right now.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna probably already happen, because we'll have wall packs on some of those
Yeah.
buildings. We're gonna have parking lot lighting that will not necessarily spill over, but it'll make it safe. So
Sure.
I think it'll achieve what you're after.
Am I allowed to ask if the applicant has made any contact with the Catcher
You can always ask whatever.
townhomes below? I mean, is there a relationship there, positive or negative, or is that not? I don't think it's required, I'm just curious.
Sure. I'll speak to the management question. This will.
I'm sorry, can you state?
Oh, sorry. My name is Jeffrey Barton with Mountain Housing Opportunities. The management of this apartment complex and the ownership is completely different
Right.
from the adjoining development.
Correct.
Whenever we build an apartment community, we seek to be a good neighbor. So we do know the owner of that property, and we'll reach out to them as we would any neighbor to see what compatibility we can do, but it will not be managed by the same entity that currently manages those.
Understood. I'm just curious if.
Yeah. I guess one perhaps clarifying question, and I think perhaps, Mr. Barton, you could answer this. Mountain Housing manages their own properties, is that?
We do not. We work with a professional property management company called Partnership Property Management. They manage our entire portfolio and do a great job. And we always encourage anyone who's nervous about us coming into their neighborhood to go visit any of our communities unannounced and just check them out, see how well they're managed. But we don't do that ourselves. We contract out.
Thank you. Any further comments or discussion among the commission?
I mean, I think it's a good project. I've worked off Tunnel Road for 4 years at the mall, and you're gonna have a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds who go there looking for a job, and I still manage 18 to 22-year-olds, and a lot of them don't have a car. It's this new generation, they're not excited to get their license, and so this transportation going to and from that corridor is really good into the plan. I do want to revisit the bike lockers. My thought is like the county parking deck that's over there off Cox Avenue, how they have the bike lockers in there. That's more of like the thought that I have. So if you could revisit that somehow to get in there, because when you think that you have like your 1-bedroom apartment and like that's literally all you have, and you don't have a lot more space to like put your bike in there, or you only have your bike and like you're bringing your groceries home from Ingles, so you're gonna carry your bike up plus all your groceries. Like if you can just put your bike in your locker and then like walk up to the 3rd flight with all your stuff, that would be like way more convenient. So I just want to applaud you for everything that you have put into this, because it's going to create so much more growth for everybody who needs it down in that area.
Thank you. I do want to make sure that, and I believe, well, let's just make sure. So for condition number 7, we're going to slightly revise that. Bike lanes are not going to be provided. Sharrows into the development, or on the entrance into the development will be provided. And then there will be good faith conversations with the adjoining property owners about the potential of Sharrows on Restaurant Court at some future time. Okay, we have, well, actually, can one of you just come up and, so we've got it on the record? Probably.
Yes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Suggs. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I know Miss Ashley wants, we got to get all that stuff correct. Okay, if there is no further discussion, I am prepared to make a motion, unless somebody else is jumping.
You said no condition about good faith efforts
For the lighting? No, we're not,
That was
yeah.
just a okay.
That was more of a conversation, yeah, we're not
I'll
gonna do
make
that. I was gonna,
Okay.
it's up to you.
Oh.
Okay. I feel like I'm voting against something, I should, at least before this affordable housing.
Okay.
I move to approve the conditional zoning request for the property located at 16 and 18 Restaurant Court from Office Business OB to Residential Expansion Conditional Zone, RES EXP-CZ, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community in that the request, 1, provides infill development and targeted growth areas, 2, increases the supply of affordable housing in proximity to schools, transit, and parks, and 3, promotes the development and availability of affordable and workforce housing.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. The motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And at 7:07, we will welcome Commissioner Barton back to the dais. All right, we have 2 more items on the agenda. I think these are going to be fairly simple. Excuse me. They're both zoning text amendments. The first one is a request to consider a proposed zoning text amendment to Chapter 7 of the Unified Development Ordinance to revise open space regulations. Planner coordinating review is Will Palmquist.
Thank you, Chair. I will be presenting, I'll be presenting this open space minor amendment to the UDO, which is a text amendment only. So some background to kick off. The UDO was amended this past summer regarding the open space requirements, essentially as a way to either require more open space for sites above 1 acre in size, or to incentivize affordable housing and or better stormwater standards. So that's been in place for, I guess, 6-7 months now, and we've been reviewing new projects against those standards. So the current code basically means, there are some exemptions to where this open space requirement would kick in, one of which is when there's a proposal for additions or expansions to an existing building. However, that is capped at 1,500 square feet. And we've come across a few projects now that have had some difficulty with an expansion of their project, of their site, where they want to do more than 1,500 square feet. And basically what this comes down to is that, they're not able to meet the base requirement that half their site is open space because it's an existing condition. If they're a commercial project, they're not able to really take advantage of the incentives regarding any affordable housing. And in order to meet the stormwater incentives, they basically have to redevelop their entire site, driveway, parking, even the building potentially, to do any kind of like subsurface, systems for stormwater management to meet the current standards. So what we're currently proposing is to, in order to better support the intent of the ordinance, which was to support adaptive reuse of properties, is to change the threshold for that exemption of expansions and additions to 50% of the building's pre-expansion floor footage, gross floor footage, And this does align with section 711.1 of the code, which lays out the thresholds for when a project needs to become fully site compliant. So that would be copacetic in that regard. While we're working on this section of code, there are a couple small changes we wanted to make, one of which is to clarify that natural open space is allowed to count for up to 50% of the total open space requirement, regardless of the exact type of natural feature identified. Right now, the wording is just confusing, and it seems to imply that only one of those natural features is capped at 50%, when in fact it's supposed to be all natural open space is only allowed to be 50% of the total requirement. It would also, this proposal would also remove historic resources from subsection D, which is described as an open space typology, since properties with historic landmark designations are exempted from open space requirements in the first place. So the pros is that this amendment would allow for the additions and expansions at existing buildings up to 50% of the pre-expansion floor area, which matches the threshold for full site compliance as cited in section 711.1. It would clarify how much natural open space can count towards a site's total open space requirement, and also removes duplicative code regarding historic resources, as properties as such are already exempted from open space requirements. The only con that staff identified is that, sites proposing additions or expansions greater than 1,500 square feet, but less than 50% of the pre-expansion floor area would not be required to provide 50% open space, nor be incentivized to meet affordable housing or stormwater standards. So there would be, sites that would be freed up to have a larger expansion to meet their needs, and they would kind of lose an opportunity to either impose higher open space standards, affordable housing, or stormwater goals as well. This amendment aligns with a few goals in the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, one of which is to increase and diversify the housing supply by reducing administrative barriers to housing development and diversification. Celebrate the unique identity of neighborhoods through creative placemaking by supporting contextually appropriate infill development in a variety of housing types, and to promote great architecture and urban design to enhance placemaking by promoting adaptive reuse as a means of conserving materials, history, and embodied energy in buildings. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the proposed zoning text amendment, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Palmquist. Any questions, concerns, comments?
I actually have one because I just read it, and I advised the Historic Resources Commission. So it looks like the Historic Resources section was struck, and I wanted to be sure that was, you checked that with the HRC.
Yeah, we have coordinated with staff, specifically Alex Cole, about that. Yeah, essentially, historic properties was identified as one of the types of open space that could count to the requirement, but at the same time, that is a somewhat vague definition, and then understanding that later in that same section, properties that are a historic landmark are already exempted from open space requirements. So I think it's unnecessary in that regard, but it also, what is a historic, historic properties are exempted. Well, what's historic? It's very undefined in that section.
It had to be a designated historic. Well, I was thinking it had to be on the National Register or have a local landmark designation, which it wasn't defined.
Right, so we either thought we could kind of better clarify it. There are a lot of properties that are in national landmark districts or identified as national landmarks, which could be overly permissive. We felt that, since landmark buildings are exempt anyway, it would kind of make sense just to leave that exemption and remove it as a typology.
I just hadn't heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
couple of questions. How many projects have come through that have butted up against this 1,500 square feet? Would you say, just like,
2 or 3.
okay, out of,
Gosh, as far as building additions go, could be dozens.
okay. So I mean, we're talking 10 or 15%? Like, it's so far, it's been a smallish number.
Smallish, some of them are, decent-sized properties that have, been older commercial projects that are, existing for a while that want to do a decent-sized expansion. 1,500 square feet is relatively small for, commercial properties, and there's really just no way around it. They can maybe go for a conditional zoning, but kind of the intent is that we wanted to have some relief for existing buildings. The idea wasn't to, penalize an existing building and property and use to have to all of a sudden either designate half their site as open space or redevelop the whole thing for stormwater, or if they're commercial use, to change their entire programming to be residential and affordable housing at that.
Sure.
So, yeah, the open space requirements we found have worked very well for new projects that typically have to meet the stormwater requirements anyway, or the affordable housing. But definitely a few properties that are looking to expand have been kind of pinched in this regard, which was not really the intent when we drafted that amendment.
Sure.
And worked with those groups to refine it over time.
No, I was just kind of curious, that makes sense. I mean, I think the only thing that gives me the pause is that, then if there is some, let's say it's a 40% expansion, and then there's some stormwater that could be done within that expansion, we lose getting at least some increment of stormwater better. I know that is an issue. It's frequently comes up when we look at, full new developments. I know sustainability looks at that. Like, without throwing a wrench in the works, did you guys look at some tiered level of, if it's 25% or less, there is no change. If it's 25 to 50%, there needs to be X increase of. And I definitely don't think that necessarily it's the open space, and definitely not the housing, which is going to sound really weird again. But I feel like it's that stormwater piece that, man, if we could just get some incremental every time something develops. And I liken it to, maybe it's a really bad analogy, but it gets to some of those where, you only have to bring stuff up 50%, and so we end up with no sidewalks in places like the old Dairy Queen, which turned into the Enterprise on Tunnel Road, where there's a goat path because they only did X amount and they didn't have to put the sidewalk. It's like,
Yeah.
I think,
not something we've looked into. We certainly could. Yeah, I think it's tricky and I'm not a stormwater expert by any means, trying to break apart some of those requirements where to do X, you might have to do A through V anyway. So it might be, I'm not sure I'm just not sure if that's feasible. We could certainly check into that. I don't know if that would work from a site engineering standpoint or not, or what they're based on the requirements of today's standards.
Yeah. I think it's, I bring it up more as, had it been looked at, and certainly I think there's a lot of multifaceted things that would need to get looked at. And maybe it's just something that, I guess my request would be to keep looking at that.
Sure.
Because I do think that that's something that, man, to miss out on even some small incremental change in that regard. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah, no, I think trying to find that balance between being, allowing development to happen, especially for existing uses, versus imposing better requirements than we had 10, 20, 30 years ago is definitely where staff's trying to find that balancing point for sure.
So what would be the type of review for this scenario? Level 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, usually it's a level 1 or 2. Typically.
There's certainly some site requirements in that, so.
So it would depend on, anything below, and this is part of the larger open space requirements too. So basically, this is only for focusing on the additions and expansions of buildings, so if they're below 50%, they wouldn't have to provide the new requirements for open space, which would also be the same 50% additions, the same threshold for full site compliance. But there are other thresholds like the building value. So let's say they're not expanding their building by only a couple square feet, but they're, painting it in gold, and it's gonna increase the value of the building more than 75%, well, then they have to bring their site into compliance anyway. So there are other triggers. This would just be based on the threshold for additions for the open space alone.
Right.
Yep.
I guess the other going up to, when having that 50% trigger.
Yep.
What if the building's 40,000 square feet? That means it can become 59,999 square feet and not have to change the mass of parking. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but it can happen, right?
Right.
Let's-
Yep.
What? I know 50% has kind of been used for a lot of things with changes. Building code looks at that. Yeah, if you're not bringing up in residential when you're doing renovations, if you're not going over 50% of value or changing more than 50%, you don't have to bring up the code. So.
Correct. Yeah.
That is
That was kind of in line with some of those other UDO standards. Because it is tough to try to find that. Otherwise, could be arbitrary thresholds.
Anything else before we do public comment? Okay. We will open for public comment at 7:22. Not seeing anybody running up for public comment. We will close for public comment at 7:22. Like I said, that would be my only comment about it, is if there's some way moving forward to look at that stormwater. I know that that's going to, it's not going to get any easier. And I think we've already know that there are issues. And I think certainly, I'm not thinking of smaller sites. I am thinking about these larger ones. Like, what if somebody does have a 30 or 40,000 square foot building? They can add on a sizable chunk and not really have to upgrade. And we may continue to be stuck for another 40 years with a 1950s era parking lot. And that just seems bad. So, yeah. Do you have any comments regarding that?
I think the cost would trigger the.
One would hope. But what if they build it out of cardboard?
Are they gonna be using cars in 50 years?
They said, where's my jetpack?
I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I motion to approve the proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable, in the public interest, are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meet the development needs of the community, and that the amendments will: 1, reduce administrative barriers to housing development and diversification. 2, support contextually appropriate infill development in a variety of housing types. 3, promote the adaptive reuse of a means of conserving materials, history, and embodied energy in the buildings. A lot more commas there, I like that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, motion passes 5-0. All right. We have one more item on our agenda. It is a request to consider a proposed zoning text amendment to Chapter 7 of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow cat cafes in more meow commercial districts. Planner coordinating review is Will Cat Palmquist.
Thank you, Chair. Definitely punned out from reviewing this with staff. We had a field day in our meetings for sure about this one. But yes, I will be presenting this zoning text amendment for Cat Cafe district expansion. Essentially, the background and proposed amendments that we're looking at here So cat cafes are defined in the UDO as premises used to house or contain homeless, orphaned, or unwanted cats that is owned, operated, or maintained by an organization that is licensed by the state as an animal shelter and devoted to the welfare, protection, and humane treatment of animals for the purpose of adoption, and which incorporates retail sales to support the interaction of patrons with cats, such as cafes, bookshops, or other permitted uses. Currently, and this was done a number of, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, to create this use and place it in a district. Currently, cat cafes are only allowed as a permitted use in the CBD zoning district. We received basically a permit and then a request from a business owner who is seeking to open a cat cafe in the Haywood Road Corridor District. And, residents, business owners can petition the city for zoning requests, and we felt that instead of making them go through a conditional zoning process or denying their permit outright, that amending the UDO to allow cat cafes in more districts was a more reasonable approach. Essentially, staff is proposing that cat cafes be allowed to operate in all commercial districts that currently allow for eating and drinking establishments. So that would include neighborhood business, Office 1, Office 2, office business, community business 1 and 2, neighborhood corridor districts, highway business, regional business, commercial, industrial, resort, institutional, river, urban, I'm really pretty good at these. Urban district, urban village, urban place, airport, CBD expansion, commercial expansion, Haywood Road 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, the Rad Lime, Lemon Street, Rad Neighborhood Transition, Rad Shopfront, Rad Riverfront, and Rad Industrial. So quite a few.
That was impressive.
The pros are that this amendment would allow cat cafes to operate as a permitted use in more commercial districts of the city. And another pro, of course, being that it provides more opportunities for cat adoption by city residents and visitors in a commercial establishment such as a cafe or bookstore, which also provides the neighborhood serving retail services. Staff has identified no cons as part of this proposed text amendment. The amendment would support 2 identified goals in the city's comprehensive plan, one of which is to promote small and independent business entrepreneurship and the maker economy by evaluating land use policies to ensure that zoning regulations support small business growth and a local maker-based economy, and also to facilitate real estate development that maximizes public benefit by ensuring all necessary land use types are provided for. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of the proposed zoning text amendment. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Palmquist. Any questions, comments?
Does this mean that they can go in businesses with food?
Yeah, there are regulations regarding health department codes and that sort of thing. So I think there's obviously separate requirements for the preparation of food and interaction of where cats would be. But essentially, the idea being that you could have cats in the same establishment that would serve food or other retail and like bookstores and other kinds of shops like that.
Okay, because seems it's different from dogs, so I'm just trying to figure out where, if they're in a restaurant that's serving food and preparing food, does this fall under that?
That would be.
Does it just fall under prepared foods?
I don't think there's a distinction, so I think it could be either. Yep.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to figure out where the difference would be between a cat cafe and a dog bar.
Yeah, we don't have that one yet in the UDO. I think some of this is a question of, where do you draw those distinctions, and could it fall under just regular eating and drinking establishments as well, assuming that there are, North Carolina Department of Health code regulations regarding such things. Since we have a cat cafe definition, we have to kind of go with that definition on the books. But your point's well taken. Something we discussed earlier in the pre-meetings, where do you kind of draw that line?
Well, because my thing is a dog bar is classified as if a dog, you couldn't do prepared foods there. So I'm wondering what the difference is between a cat cafe, because a cat it can, if it's in prepared foods, I'm just wondering if a dog bar came to us and asked for this exact same thing, we would have to say no. So why would we be able to say yes today for a cat cafe? That's my only question.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how we would classify.
No, there are service dogs in restaurants. There's not dogs in a dog bar. Like if you go to, there's 3 dog bars here in town. They cannot have a restaurant in there like where they prepare food. So as I'm reading this, you're saying that like a cat can go into like a restaurant. I'm just want to be like prepared when a dog bar comes and they ask us for the same thing.
Sure. Yeah, and we haven't looked into that, so I can't speak to that explicitly. So there might be different considerations based on the type of animal.
They have to meet the exact definition of a cat cafe, and then whatever, as you said, health codes come into play, that's separate from the zoning authority. So this is saying, this is a use, and this is, as long as it meets that, and then whenever you have a use, even if your use was a restaurant, you have to meet codes that are separate. So I would say that that's where it would come into play, is deciding. And if somebody came to us and said, the dog bar is a different use, and we don't have it as a defined use, and I don't think it's a similar, well, I don't know. I mean, sometimes when you don't have a defined use, you say it's similar to, so it would probably be a dog place, but it had to meet the humane, the rules that they were sponsored, like a shelter, and then they would have to meet the regulations between eating and food and having the pets there, or animals there.
Yeah, well, and I think, and I haven't pulled up the original, I remember when the whole cat cafe came through, and there are, you do have to meet the health standards. Like I think there's something about like the restaurant part even has to be separated. I don't remember exactly how, but yeah.
I know the rules.
Yeah, there's the health code stuff.
I know
Yeah.
them all. I just
Well,
want to
and
make
we-
sure that we know that.
Yeah.
I'm anticipating.
Well, and we were talking about it in the pre-meeting, and we were joking around about it a little bit, but as you had that, whichever, maybe it was the very first slide up, I'm sitting there reading it and going, why couldn't we just put animal, well, but then you start to think, okay, are we gonna allow snakes how do you start to say, because you're right, someone now probably is gonna say, I want a dog cafe. And then you want the Potbelly Pig Cafe, and so, yeah, I'm gonna leave that for you all in September or October, or whenever that comes. You guys can take care of that one and change this to be all-inclusive animal adoption cafe. I think that might be the broader umbrella.
But my question is there is still a health standard that has to be met, like
Yes.
vaccines, no rabies.
I'm sure.
It's not
yes.
just a cat off the street. I mean, it's a cat that's been.
You don't know, we live in Asheville.
I would be more worried about the dog in the brewery probably than I think.
So we can make cats have vaccines and not?
I don't think we are
Okay.
in charge of defining that, but
A
anyway.
lot of these questions are outside the zoning
Dogs
purview.
aren't included, we shouldn't approve this.
Oh,
Like,
no, I wasn't getting at that. I'm just thinking that, again, we were talking about it in the pre-meeting, and I am wondering,
Yeah.
I think maybe the umbrella does need to,
Right.
since we've let the cat out of the bag, literally, we need to
Yeah.
get that umbrella bigger.
Yeah, in this case, we definitely have, if a dog bar came forward, we might just classify it as a bar use or an eating establishment and not worry about whether there's
Yeah.
different pets being brought in and leave that to a health standard thing and not worry about it from a zoning, because
True.
if there's not a zoning impact, then maybe it's not a zoning concern. And
True.
in this case, since we have a definition, it's pretty clear that this is what it's intending, and therefore it's not in any other district currently except CBD, and there's not a way to classify it as another use, since it is what it is, pretty explicitly as stated as such.
Makes sense. Okay, if there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and open for public comment. We'll open for public comment at 7:35 p.m. And I'm guessing that's why there's all these people over here. Thank you for being patient. The wheels of, the city turns.
Yeah.
My name is Hannah Soboleski. It's totally fine, don't worry. We had nothing else to do but to be here tonight to talk to you guys about this in particular. So to answer your first question so in order to have a cat cafe in the state of North Carolina, the cats have to be in a completely separate area from any food prep or any serving of food. So people are allowed to go and purchase prepped food, and also the food cannot be prepped on site. It has to be prepackaged. So the people are allowed to go up and, walk into like a retail space, a bookstore space in the front and, purchase, a snack that's in a bag of chips or whatever, and then they're allowed to take it in the back area where the cats are, but none of that is allowed to be, cats are not allowed to be in the front area or any other area where there's food sold at all. Furthermore, the Cat Cafe amendment before was approved, but it was only approved for the downtown district, which is fine, but I think that, that kind of really prohibits small business owners like myself that are wanting to try to do something really good with their lives. I'm also the executive director of our partnership rescue, Binks's Home for Black Cats. We do fully vet all of our cats, and no vetting will be happening on site. They will be fully medically vetted by our veterinarian, and all of that has to be on site before we can even bring the cats in at all. They also have to go through a quarantine period of 10 days before they can be brought in. So all of that is under the Department of Agriculture Veterinary Board Division, and they actually, we're working with them currently, and they have approved that this would all work together well as long as we could get the zoning. So that's all I had to say, unless you guys have any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Any more public comment? We will close for public comment at 7:37. Yeah, I think originally it was only in the CBD because the one that was started all this was Charlotte Street. Although that's not CBD, so I'm trying to remember then where it was. Maybe it went from Charlotte Street to somewhere else. Anyway, that's why it was only in the one zone. I think it's fine to expand it into others. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I agree. It strikes me as strange that we are regulating this through zoning. I frankly
I didn't even want to
don't
get there.
think that zoning is the appropriate place when there are, health department, Department of Agriculture, other regulations that these types of businesses have to comply with. It being the case that it is regulated in our UDO, and expansion is a no-brainer in my book.
No.
But I defer to Kim to make the motion if she'd like to.
Yeah, you were nominated in the pre-meeting to make the
Okay,
motion.
thanks.
As long as you do the proper pronunciation. Yes.
I move to approve the proposed wording amendments to the Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable, are in the public interest, are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meet the development needs of the community, and that the amendments will, 1, ensure that zoning regulations support small business growth and a local maker-based economy, and 2, ensure all necessary land use types are provided for.
I will second that. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Hopefully, maybe the next time this comes or something comes, it just gets taken off of the zoning realm. But yeah, I would agree. It is a little strange, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
This will go to city council April 25th. Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful
All right.
the city staff is working through all the.
So that concludes tonight's agenda.
Fuzzy details.
The next meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission will be held on Wednesday, May 3rd, pre-meeting at 4:30 upstairs, main meeting here in the same room at 5 p.m. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned.
I didn't have any jokes. I was like, let's just pass this cat thing.
I've been waiting for this all night.
I just want to be done with
Let's
it.
just do
I just want to be done with the cats.
It's so silly.
Speaking of, do I hear a cat?